Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming to today's discussion. And while the mic is okay, I want to welcome all of you who came despite the rainy weather outside, and also different parts of Europe with our guests. So just to briefly introduce you, who is sitting here with me, on my left, Sanjoy Roy, to us from London, Emily May, coming from Berlin this time, Petra Dotlačilová, who is now based in Paris, but was long years in Stockholm, Hild Borchgrevink from Norway, and as well Anette Therese Pettersen from Norway. But first of all, I would like to say that these people have one thing in common. They all held lectures and seminars about dance writing, and that's the topic of today, to reflect all these seminars and lectures about how to write about dance. These seminars were organized by both the project Performing Dance and Performing Arts Criticism in Europe, which is supported by the EEA Norway Grants, and with our partners Performing Arts Hub Norway and Performing Criticism globally, but also with the review writing workshops with Springback writers that happened during Czech Dance platform and Taneční Prague. So we joined the forces together, and we talked that maybe we would like to have all these people together who were somehow interested in motivating dance writers in Czech Republic. So before we start, I would like to ask the directors of Taneční Prague and member of jury of Czech Dance platform, Ivana Krojcmanová, just to say a few words before the Czech Dance platform starts.
Hello, everybody. I'm really very happy to welcome you to the Czech Dance platform. This is the first date, and actually this is the first event of the Czech Dance platform this year. It's the 28th year of Czech Dance platform, and we are very proud that there are all the time many artists, many presenters, but also journalists coming, and we feel that the reflection of dance is extremely important, and I'm happy that we can co-organize this event and that we had a chance to work with Sanjoy Roy last year on the review writing workshop together with Nina Vangeli from the Dance Zone here. And I hope that this discussion will help a little bit to understand more where we can go and what can we bring with writing about dance to the artists, to the public, to the dance community, but also the large public. So enjoy the event.
Thank you very much for your words. And just to let you know, this Facebook, but the main platform is, so if you're connected to Zoom, you can ask your questions in the Q&A place, or maybe answer the questions also in the chat, etc. So I will try to sometimes look and answer these questions or bring them into the debate. But if you comment, and you're watching us on YouTube, so you can comment there as well, and we will get the questions in here. Thanks to my watching it with you. Just jump into it. First of all, I wanted to present everybody who is the dance critic, or who are the dance critics, also who are the people sitting here with me. So I would like each of you to introduce yourself and somehow specify what was your journey to become a dance critic or dance writer, and how does it correspond with other jobs of yours? What place does it have in your life? How much of your life or of your everyday work is devoted to dance criticism? How is a life of a dance critic? So who wants to start?
Okay, there were so many questions. So my name is Anette, and I'm a theater and dance critic. And I've been working as a dance and theater critic for 15 years, I think now. And at the moment, I'm also working on a PhD that also is about dance and theater criticism and what a critical practice for youth could be, actually. So I'm sort of looking into some of the same questions as what criticism can be, and how it can change, also with the sort of the change of media and how we work and the arts. So that's sort of one aspect. And I came into dance criticism from literature. I think this is quite common. I came from literature and then into theater studies, just to sort of fill up my degree, and I just stayed in theater studies. And then I moved sideways into dance. And then I just sort of stayed in dance. So, you know, I don't know where I'll be going from here. But yeah. And even when I'm not working on a PhD, I have for the last years been doing criticism full time, both writing about dance and theater, and doing quite a lot of workshops and projects exploring dance and criticism and, you know, what this can be.
So you're 100% in the topic.
I think actually I would say yes.
Yeah, great.
So, but, you know, I do editing and writing and workshops, and so I do a lot of different things, but everything's within performing arts criticism. Yes.
Great. Thank you. Congrats.
Thank you. My name is Hild. My journey into dance criticism actually started in music. I'm a musicologist and music critic. And then also I also studied some writing, creative writing. But then someone asked me if I could for 1 year be the editor of a digital platform called Scenekunst.no in Norway, who does theater, music and dance. And then I kind of had to pretend that I knew something about, or at least I had to get others to write about dance. But there are some parallels between music and dance. So it was the dance people that I felt most, it felt closest to actually, in terms of writing about things and bodies and the abstract formats. And so it was a natural way of development in a way. And so now I'm also actually trying to put some of these experiences back into the music field, because musicians are quite bad at thinking about bodies and space, and they just think it's just obvious it's there. And that's a quite interesting perspective, I think. And I also, together with Anette, I've been doing some writing workshops, and also worked with how to do that in an interesting way, both for the participants and for the artists and for us. So we love developing that format too. Yeah, maybe that's me.
Thank you. So is that what you're doing every day, or is there something else you make living of?
Right now I'm also doing a PhD, but that is about this, that what I talked about, trying to watch music from a more performative perspective.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So my name is Petra, and despite I live in different places, I'm actually Czech, and my journey started here. And the way to dance criticism was through dance, because I always danced, but also always knew that I'm not going to be professional. I knew that was not my way, but still wanted to be in connection with dance somehow. And there was this wonderful option of dance studies that we have at the Academy of Performing Arts, at the Music and Dance Faculty. And so that was quite natural, because we studied history, but also theory, analysis of dance, and writing about dance was our tool. It was what we do. So it was quite natural to start writing. And at the time we were studying the same program, but let's say I was a few years above, and they already started the magazine. So slowly I started to write for Czech Dance News. Actually, first reviews happened when I was living in Paris, when I was doing my Erasmus in France. So when I saw so many things, I thought, like, I need to start writing about it, and I proposed, and they accepted my writing, and since then we've been collaborating. And yeah, that for me, it's my contribution to dance. That's my way of dealing with dance, is in writing and studying it. But I'm not full-time dance critic, never was. I think now, after second PhD, I can say that I'm a researcher, but in history. So I studied dance history mainly, and theater history, and I'm now doing a postdoc in in the field of historical costume in Versailles, in Paris, between Stockholm and Paris. So my main job is research, and then I do the writing on the side and also lecturing. So that's me.
Thank you. So I just realized that thanks to you, Taneční Actuality went international 10 years ago. Was it maybe? So thank you for that. And this is where it leads. So great job. Thank you for being with us still. Emily.
Thank you. So yes, I'm Emily. I'm English, but based in Berlin. I also got into dance writing through dance. I originally wanted to be a professional dancer or choreographer, and I trained at Trinity Laban in London. But for me, even there was kind of before deciding to apply and pursue professional dance training, and I've always still loved writing and literature and words, but at first I didn't necessarily see the connection between those two passions. And then in my second year of training at Laban, I realized I really missed writing, and I saw an advert for a program called Resolution Review, which Sanjoy was a mentor on. And it was following Resolution Festival at the place and being taught how to write about dance in conjunction with that. And immediately seeing the advert, I thought, aha, this is what I've been looking for. This is combining my two different interests, looking at dance critically, but also being involved with the contemporary dance scene. And from there, I just kind of started writing reviews for student publications in London. One, because of the interest, and also because theatre tickets are very expensive in London for students. And then from then on, it just kind of kept the ball rolling. I moved to Berlin in 2018 or 19. There was a bit of back and forth, so I'm not sure exactly when it was official. But yeah, and then since then, I've been writing reviews for publications kind of across Europe and the UK. But I also have a full-time job that pays the bills. I'm very lucky. It's also in writing and editing in the cultural industries, a lot with music. But yes, dance writing takes up my evenings and weekends and holidays and all the time outside the 9 to 5.
So just do I understand it right that music is paying you to afford writing about dance?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much.
And I also like to try and think of myself sometimes as an undercover dance person trying to champion it in different spheres. So,
great. It's a way to do it. Thank you. Sanjoy.
Yeah, hi. My name is Sanjoy Roy. I am based in London. Like Emily, I only did 1 year at Laban as a sort of mature student, like 23. Yeah. And prior to that, I'd actually worked for a medical publisher, and actually my skills at that point were more to do with publishing than writing. And it just so happened that just as I finished my course, there was a job that came up in a specialist dance bookseller and publisher. And because I'd done publishing production, I started producing and editing their books and a magazine. And the editor of the magazine at one point said, why don't you write something for the magazine? You're in the easiest place in the world to be published in the magazine since you're producing the magazine. So I said, okay. And then she started asking me to write for once per issue. And then I actually left for reasons of, I just had enough of no hope kind of arts, small independent publishing. And I left and took more or less 2 years out of, and I wasn't expecting to go back. And then because I'd been writing, actually because I'd been editing the magazine, I was in touch with all of the dance writers. And then the dance critic for The Guardian rang me up at work and said, do you want to do some backup work for The Guardian? And I was like, what? I was very, very professional until the last moment. And I said, act professional, I'm at work. And then at the end, I said, anyway, my mom and dad will be so proud And then I was like, I just blew my cover. I just blew my cover totally. So that was actually 20 years ago when this year was the first time I wrote for The Guardian. And then, you know, that suddenly, you know, I became a thing, and people would ask me to write and talk and write more. And so I kept saying yes. But for all of that period, so that was 20 years ago, until 2 years ago, my main job was still, in fact, my full-time job was was not in culture, it was not in dance, it was doing publishing production for a translation agency. So I was producing publications in different languages, and that's what I lived on. All of The Guardian, all of the dance was evenings and weekends, and it was very high status, but it was totally, you know, there was no way I would live on that. And I just, yeah. Then with Springback magazine, which is a project from Aerowaves Dance Network, it's a bit like Resolution Review, but on a European scale. They asked me in 2018 to be the editor of a magazine that was for those writers to develop. And then there came a point 2 years ago where I was like, 2.5 years ago, where I was like, I can't do both I can't do all of this anymore. So they guaranteed, so now basically they've given me an overall 2 days a week work, which means that I gave up my stable day job just before the pandemic, which was maybe thinking I could get the freelance work. Anyway, and now at least I have a monthly, like 2 days a week plus freelance. And as far as writing goes, I never, you know, I enjoyed dance, but actually I was more doing typography and publications, editing and production. And writing, I mean, it's just really hard, and I don't understand people who do it for pleasure, because it's really quite painful. And I never had it as an ambition to do writing, but it's what people know me for. But I say, well, they say, how did you become a writer? And I say, well, you know, on my good days, I say it was an accident, and on my bad days, I say it was a mistake. There you go.
Okay, thank you very much for this honesty. So even the dance critic or well-known dance critic happened to this by mistake and cannot really live from dance writing or from this job. Although it's a high status, and we might be all famous for our writing, for our painful time. So this leads me to the question about understanding of contribution of dance writing. Do you feel it is in your country understood and appreciated by those who we write for? And who are they, the people who read us? Do they feel grateful that we write and we do this painful process? What do you think? Grab the mics, fight for them.
It's really hard to know, to be honest, because I think we can take a parallel with artists and performance, because they too put their work in public. But there's a very common thing in writing that I know that the people who are professionals may say something about what I've written. Maybe it's the PR people, the company, some people in the audience, some other people who've got a professional interest. But I'm always writing for, I always imagine myself writing for not those people. And then it's really hard to know, because some people, if they disagree, they might complain. That's okay. but if they agree, they don't usually say anything. So it's really, I think people who are performing actually find the same thing. You know, you might get comments from people you know via a network, but then you actually want to go beyond that. And then, I don't know. Yeah.
What about the others?
Yeah, I agree that it's impossible to know who we are writing for, but I think the writing in itself gives the dance a presence in another space and in another place, in another site than the actual dance, and that is important for, I think, for this kind of afterlife. Whether the people like it or not, it actually is there somewhere else and can be discovered by someone else. And that is that strange mechanism that we call public or public space. It's an interesting one, and how it actually can be there in both those places, not at the same time, but still this one presence can produce the other presence. I think is quite interesting.
Bouncing off what you said about making it discoverable for other people, it kind of links to who I don't know who ends up reading it, but who I like to think I'm writing for is often kind of similarly to Sanjoy, not the kind of people who you would necessarily think. And I think it's kind of personal because I come from rural Worcestershire in the middle of England, and I grew up thinking that, or surrounded by people at least who thought things like contemporary dance or art weren't necessarily for them, or would, yeah. And so I like to think that by writing and making things discoverable, I try and write in a way that I think is going to attract or engage or be exciting for people from home, or anyone around the world that can discover contemporary dance and enjoy it as well, and not think, oh, it's this scary this scary niche art form that isn't necessarily for them.
Yeah, maybe, well, as a historian, I
Yeah.
would like to
The afterlife.
the afterlife, yeah, because it's not only we as historians today, we read the reviews, and for us it's basically the only way how to know what they thought about the dance or about dance, because we don't have any other sources. But I think even like when we think about dance today, that will be studied in the future. I think even like when we think about dance, okay. Of course, we can see the videos, and they will stay hopefully somewhere. But we as critics, we really put another layer, or like we add something, we kind of maybe put it in the context, or it could be studied also from like, how did we look at dance? How did we actually formulate, or what we thought then was important? So that is also a way that nobody else could do. Like we comment on what is actually happening, and then that will be studied in the future. So I think that's also something not to forget. And just jumping back to sort of the present moment is also, I think it's something about in Norway, most of the dance writing is in more specialized magazines. It's not so much in the daily papers. I write for daily papers as well, and that's a struggle. I really have to sort of, sometimes it's a bit like, okay, but I can do this theater production if I can also write about this dance production. It's this bargaining. Because it's something about, I think there's many things this could also be discussed, but I think what I sort of like with dance writing is the same aspect as quite a lot of people who write about dance have a dance background. And in my experience, quite a lot of people in the dance field are reading what's being written about dance to a larger extent than within theater, for instance. And I think there's a big diversity in who writes about dance, and it does also makes it really interesting to often to read. But I wish it was sort of, I know when I write for more specialized magazines, of course, I know that whoever's reading already know about dance. They already know what contemporary dance is. I don't have to explain it. And it's something about, like you said, to introduce it to a larger audience, then you also need to know that, that the larger audience will sort of find it. And in Norway, this is still it's a difficulty that it's especially contemporary dance, because a ballet you can write about in the sort of big papers, but they don't write a lot about contemporary dance. A bit more now than 10 years ago, but not like loads. I get support from the audience, I see.
Just to add as well, what you said made me think of, I think, as well, writing about dance, or the contribution is somehow, I don't know if this is exactly the right word, but kind of giving a process of like legitimization to dance as an art form. I think because of its history and how it's developed as an art form, it's not necessarily taken seriously all the time by people from outside of it. And I feel like, I mean, I've had people come up to me when I tell them what they do, like, what, you can write about dance? You can be a dance critic? How do you write about dance? You know, what is there to write about? Like, how do you pull this apart? How do you find meaning? And this is still like an opinion that pervades with in certain areas. And I think by writing about contemporary dance, getting it into, obviously it's still hard, but getting it into a newspaper or getting it in these places where it shows like, no, this is a serious art form that has a lot of thought behind it and can be analyzed and studied and has a history. I think that that's an important part of what writing about dance can offer as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on what you said, Petra, because I came to think of that because there is a very little writing about dance in daily newspapers in Norway now. But for some years in the 90s, for some reason, there were kind of a boost where one contemporary dance production could get kind of 4 or 5 reviews. And I made an article once where I ended up comparing 5 reviews of the same production, and that was super interesting, just because they had different perspectives. Of course, those 5 critics, one you could see that one was coming from theater, and another was a dancer, a third was a ballet person, and they saw the same thing so differently. And of course, partially all of them, but puzzling those 5 things together, it was really, I really wished it was still like that in a way, because it gives something very nice. But of course, the big trouble today, I think, is actually how people are going to find what we write, and that's the media situation in general. Things are so distributed, and where, I mean, it's not even in the same newspaper; it's just on the internet somewhere. So, and that is a challenge.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing about who is it for. I think in practice, people have different motivations for reading it. So it's actually, who's it for is a good question, but people use it differently and they want different things from it depending on who they are. And then it becomes, it becomes for different kinds of people who have different interests, whether they're professional or non-professional, what their own interests are. And then you just, well, I always try and imagine that I'm pitching it to people who might be passing by the window, and then if they're not interested, you're not going to reach them because they're not going to look in the window. But if you can make that window open to those who are just passing by, you can kind of count on the specialists and the insiders who want something already. But I try and make it open to those kind of undefined people.
Okay, thank you. I would maybe continue on what you mentioned about the obstacles or hurdles to become a dance critic, and what are the conditions for dance writers to what would be the ideal status of getting like less bargaining about the format, about the length, maybe about the price. So what is the status of the dance critique in your country, and how could we get it better? So if you can specify the obstacles that we feel when saying or motivating ourselves to write a review, and where would it help? Because I think it's but it would be nice to compare somehow what are the problems that we have to get over every time. You mentioned there are not many papers, daily papers writing about dance reviews.
Yeah, I can try to elaborate a little bit on that. I mean, there are not much writing about dance in the daily newspapers, but there are in the more specialized and online magazines. It's growing. I mean, like 5 or 6 years ago, it wasn't so much there either, but there has been a more conscious work about that for a while. So of course you need somewhere to publish. That's one thing that we need, and we need more places to publish actually. So that it's not only one place where people go. And then it's of course we have to. I mean, all of us have said something that we have other jobs than writing about dance, and we write about dance in the weekends. So there is the need for some pay, or some fee.
Yeah. So how is it with the pay in Norway?
Well, it's
Norway is the great country where everyone can get what they ask for. No,
I mean, I wish it was like that, but it has been. It's getting better, but it's still. I think what Norway has done, which it has been good, is that we have one critics association. We have all the critics, literature, theater, music, and dance, and fine arts kind of went together.
Wow.
And formed one.
They're in one association.
They're in one association with kind of three departments, and that makes it a little bit easier to push on the government, because whenever the government calls for like feedback from the field, like they have to do politically, there is a unit there that can answer and say, the critics, we think this, we want this. And that's an organizational thing that is possible to do, I think.
So is it the pay same for the dance reviews and for performance?
We have actually the same
pay.
It's called, how to say that in English, it's kind of it's not the thing that you can't go and say that I shall have this sum. It's kind of you can say that it's anbefalt, recommended to pay this. And then very few of the daily newspapers pays the recommended fee, but it's getting closer, and actually having those recommended fees, it helps, because then you can take those and go to when people ask you to do something for a funny too small fee, you can say that, okay, here it is.
I see. And is it a fee for a page or a review or 1 hour of your work?
It's a format thing, so it's not about our work, but it's about the kind of type of text,
like interview column.
So one single review, normal review is one kind of pay, and an essay is another kind of pay. Lecture is the third kind.
I can say the same as in France. I mean, they have something called Maison des écrivains et des auteurs, and they have some kind of recommended fees, which is 40 euros for 1,500 characters.
So then it's linked to character.
Yeah.
1,500 characters for 40 euros.
Yeah, which is less than our standard page. So you can count, like a review would be at least 100 euros, more than that. Now they pay, some other magazines pay like 200 euros per review, which is up to 1,000 words, which is already quite big. Yeah. So there are these recommended fees. But in the same time, we have a lot of websites. So this is more like for printed or like more serious journals or magazines. But in the same time, there are quite prestigious websites that don't pay anything at all to the critics, and some still write for them. Which I think this is quite a problem, because then.
But it's great. There are so many writers who want to write, no? Even for free.
And I should add that we don't have anything like that in Czech Republic, like a recommended.
Not yet. After this discussion,
working on it.
It will be tomorrow. There are maybe.
I'll follow up later. I'll do the round first, and I'll follow up. Okay.
So if before I just wanted to ask maybe you two. So what is maybe to have an idea, what is an average pay for 1 hour in a supermarket doing this P comparing to one review? So if you get for review 100, 200 euros, what is how much can you earn in McDonald's in 1 hour? I don't know, in Paris now, just to have an idea.
Yeah.
what is better to make living?
I can say in Norway.
Okay.
So I tried to do some research, and it's surprisingly difficult. But if you are below the age of 18, so if you like completely have no experience, then the hourly sort of minimum wages would be almost 12 euros
Per hour.
But if you are a sales and service person, it should be 21, 22 euros per hour. And I also went into and looked at, because the Norwegian Critic Association did a huge survey of how the critics sort of look at their own work, how they experience their work, what they earn, how much they work. And the average critic spent 12.7 hours on a text. And the average amount they got paid, this was in 2017, so 5 years ago, was 290 euros. So about 22 euros, 23 euro per hour. So that's sort of, that is actually the
average pay.
Yeah,
wow.
It is. But I would also say that in the years following, it has sort of the recommended fee has gone up, and I know there are more papers following it. Also because a bit like Hild said, with the Critics Association, with all the critics being together in the papers, more and more critics that's also united and, you know, formed and demanded higher wages for everyone, which has also worked. Because if you lose all your critics at once, if you lose all the critics in a newspaper in both literature, music, arts, theatre, dance, then it's quite a thin paper. And so that's that's really has worked for quite a lot of critics to get more decent pay. So I would just, that's this sort of to unite, to work collectively, which is very often not a part of what critics do, is something to really bear in mind.
Well, but the positive is after my simple counting. So if you write a review per day, you can live from being a dance critic, right?
Well, if a critic a day is 12.7, so almost 13 hours, that's really, really long working hours. But you could definitely live if you got the recommended fee and wrote a critic a day. I think it would be that would be okay. A really, really good working, month. Yeah. But I don't think there's that many performances in Norway. So
I don't think any of us can write a review per day, right?
Exactly. Could you do that? No.
If you have to eat, maybe.
I think kind of maybe jumping off this, I think then it's interesting. It sounds like it's similar for everyone, but that usually you get paid for in respect to length of like, oh, it's a longer piece, or it's this per word or whatever. And me and Sanjoy were actually talking about this earlier, that it takes me a lot longer to write a 250 word piece that I have in places been paid £25 for, than to where I can write you over 1,000 words in 2 hours, and none of it'll be very good. But the time that it takes is like editing it down and making your point in a few amount of words. So it's actually quite, it's kind of very oxymoronic that you get paid much more for, not much more, but more for longer pieces than the much shorter ones. And it also depends on so many other factors, like whether it's an interview and you talk to multiple different people. You know, I'm sure none of us have personal assistants that are transcribing these interviews for us, or sorting through audio transcripts, and then contacting people, working around their schedules. Like, so yeah, the kind of money to word count ratio feels quite simplistic in comparison to everything that goes on.
Yeah, at the same time, it has to, one has to start somewhere, and it has to be connected to the text in some way. And the Critics Association in Norway they have recently started to work closer with the journalists, because normally the journalists were kind of high above us in recommended fee, but now it's getting closer, and we're also talking to them about how they measure their work. because they count in this. Of course, if you do an interview with 4 people, it's paid more than if you do an interview with 1 person or just writing one piece of paper. So that's also a strategy that's possible to do, to try to go to freelance journalists and work with them.
Mm-hmm.
Just I guess in London 20 years ago, there are maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 what we call broadsheet newspapers, the established one, and I think maybe 4 or 5 of them had a named dance critic. By 10 years ago, and certainly by 5 years ago, it's really one, I would say, that still has one actual staff dance critic. The others, either they don't have anyone, or they have freelance, or they have somebody who's working as an editor or doing something else in the same role. At the same time, there have been a number of sites which have been set up. One of them famously by a whole load of arts critics who got cut from their newspapers, so they decided to set up a website, and they publish for free. And it was on the basis that if it ever made money, then they would share. But it's never made money, you know. And there are a number of websites that operate on that same model of the payment is effectively your review ticket that you have, and then so you get to see shows and you don't get you have a free ticket, but you then don't get any payment for the actual work after that. So there are definitely quite a few of those, and some of them, like you say, have some really very highly experienced good writers doing it for free, and some of them have been open to other people who have found a way into writing through starting to write for free, but then they're not, you know, they're not paying for the work. Should we say that? And yeah, that's the situation in London. There's certainly no you know, union of and there's no standard pay rates. I did a quick calculation this morning as well. So the highest, again, the question of what you count as your working hours is very hard. But if I just did time writing plus time watching plus time traveling, I would get, for the highest paid reviews, I would get, say, between 20 and 30 euros per hour of work.
Per one review.
For a magazine.
Per hour.
Yeah, for a magazine, it would be half of that. And then for a website, it would probably be a third. But there's really no way I could, you know, multiply that up, which is why I actually work as an editor more than as a writer, apart from the fact that writing is just really hard, you know, so. Yeah.
Maybe Petra, can you say how is it in Czech, or do you have the numbers? Because I really don't, but I'm counting like it. We also trying to pay for an article at least like 10-hour work.
Yeah, so I calculated. I mean, we do make a difference. We don't really pay per certain amount of characters or pages. We pay per piece, and the standard would be something like 60 euro, so 1,500 Czech, so 60 euros or so for a review, and then it's more for a interview and less for like shorter pieces, but it always depends how long it took for the writer to produce, how much work on editing was there, whether it was like you need to go to another city to see the show and things like that. So we always like look at that, but that is 60 euros would be like minimum or average, let's say, and then so the average
I think the minimal wage pay for
minimum-
hour is now like
Some-
€4, no?
Something like that, 120. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I would now like to inspire all our listeners before Sanjoy adds something, so that you can also comment or tell us how is it in your country, because it would be nice to have this comparison. If there are some associations or recommended prices, how many newspapers, what are the obstacles or what are the possibilities to write in your specific country, because we have only few countries in here. So it would be nice to get some comments anywhere you are watching right now, because we will gather them. So thank you very much. Sorry, Sanjoy.
No, just a quick thing. The rates that I just quoted were for a review. When I'm just amazed that you can write 1,000 words. And I was like, it takes me a day to write 1,000 words. But I also think it's a little it's a good headline figure to talk about your minimum wage in relation to your work, but we are not stacking supermarket shelves. We're not doing a multiple procedure thing, and we are accumulating a cultural capital, which a supermarket shelf stocker does not. And I just wanted to, say that.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning. Definitely. You want to add? No. Okay, so my next question is now how to motivate new writers to write dance reviews with these conditions. How did you manage during your seminars? And this is also the place I would like if our attendees or participants of the seminars to jump in if you have any ideas or feedbacks or questions, so to write me questions so that I can transfer it to the forum. But anyway, you were leading many of these seminars, so maybe what was the most surprising for you during working with new emerging writers where do they come from, or how do you motivate them? I can start.
I would like to start. I mean, for us, we started this project 1 year ago with international beginner writers in the middle of pandemic, and I was surprised like how many applied to be part of this 2-day workshop where they couldn't even go anywhere. They couldn't see the shows in presence. Everything was online. But how many and how good they were. How really enthusiastic for some of them. It was really first time they started to write about dance. But they were so into it. And from very varied, they were either artists or coming from some completely different discipline, or also more interested in writing. Some were really looking for like expanding their own practice as artists through writing and discussion. And it was really impressive. And it was like, I just felt like, oh, there is so many people who want to write about dance. And that like afterwards, they were really grateful for having this opportunity for like testing how to do this, how to look at dance, and also bringing their own expertise, also like the background, some people coming from anthropology or so it was very, very interesting, and it evoked a lot of hope in me, I would say, for the future of dance writing.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, just follow up, because it feels less like motivating than that they are already motivated. But it's also, there's, like you say, a lot of them are artists, some of them are writers. And I think that's most of the times when I do these dance writing workshops, it is a combination of people who have different backgrounds. And I think this is also something about that the people attending the workshop is learning from each other somehow. And you don't have the same sort of skills, and you don't have the same things you want to learn. So I think this also feeds into and makes it interesting text. And interesting to work with. And I've been doing a lot of workshops lately with youth who did not choose to see the performances and did not choose to sort of, you know, and then I also see that sort of it's a big their response to contemporary dance. It's a lot more varied. It's so they have so many different things to think about and or draw, or, you know, however they respond to it, while the more traditional theatre has a tendency to lead a lot more into sort of some very specific feedbacks, which I find there's a huge sort of, I think that's what's really interesting with dance. It is, you never know where it's going to go somehow.
I also wanted to add that they learn from each other, but also I learned so much during like leading the workshop, you know, because you read so many different opinions and like coming from different backgrounds. So it was very inspiring for me as well.
I also wanted to follow up on that, what you said, Anette, that I really think that's one special thing with dance, that it generates text in a way. It generates very many it can generate so many different angles of things, because of course it's less specific than theater, or less leading, as you said. So that's a really inspiring thing for me when I teach dance writing. That there are so many different ways of writing about the same thing. And I also think that what we're talking about with people coming from different backgrounds and with different interests, there is a space there where they can actually be, that also dance creates in a way, and that connects to the question of who we are writing for. And so if we manage to have a writing workshop with an anthropologist, breakdancer, ballet person, musician, artist, then suddenly this spreads also through them to their discussions and their everyday lives in a way, which I think is a kind of guerrilla way of working that might work.
I wanted to, because it's not so long ago that I was also the budding dance writer in the workshops through Resolution Review and also through Spring Break, which Sanjoy mentioned. And I think one motivating or interesting factor that then I've taken on when I did a workshop last year with some people about new media formats. And I think that was something that really inspired me. And it was kind of through, at the beginning of the pandemic, like being opened my eyes through Springback and activities I've been involved through there, like how multifaceted the role of a dance writer can be. And it's kind of difficult to define it as a title as well. Like when the pandemic hit, we started doing video interviews with people over Zoom, you know, doing a lot more moderating, and then we're here now discussing and talking. Or also I did an Instagram takeover for Laban for International Women's Day, you know, and there's all these kind of new elements or things that can happen alongside the traditional format of writing a review, which then through this workshop I was kind of talking to some students at a Performing Arts Academy about. And I think this kind of playful or like openness to new ways of approaching the scary topic of criticism can be quite engaging. Like we did some activities of like, oh, how would you make a meme response to this, a dance piece, or what and things like this, which was mainly a bit of fun. But I think, yeah, it's kind of interesting to think about how, as we move forward, what is dance writing or dance criticism going to look like with the new era of technology.
You just reminded me the drill we had in Springback Academy 2014 when we had to formulate a tweet after each show. That was hard. That was like the hardest kind of review I have ever written.
Yeah, I forgot that. We don't force people to do that anymore. So, because, yeah. But it's interestingly enough, one of the people on that 2014 forced tweeting course actually found it very useful, and has said about she's not developing a how to tweet course, but she is right now developing a strand of writing that is about discovering what is essential for you and what communicates in a form that takes up no more than is absolutely necessary. So, you know, I mean, it's led to something, yeah.
As you said, the shortest reviews are those that take the longest time. So for me, it's really useful. It was very stressful to produce it in such a short time, to condense.
But I think, I mean, I never worked inside a newspaper, thank the Lord. But for example, if you're producing, if you're like a professional journalist, part of it is often like, you have to do the listings and you just write one sentence and you have to, you know, produce it by the deadline at the end of the day. So you have to do like 10 of those and 15, and then, you know, it's actually a good training. I know people, it's quite hard, but actually having to do something to a format that's very short and very focused, I think it just works wonders for, it doesn't have to be dance writing, but people who are working in communications, in press, in writing program notes, in writing press releases, you know, that's the kind of thing they need to do, in fact. Yeah.
It's kind of a continuation of that, but I just thought that maybe it's we could also mention the project you did where you kind of also didn't just work with writers, but with the editors. When in the daily papers, Dansekritikk.
Yeah. Yeah. So many projects, and you know, dance critic movement. Yeah, because that I think also because of we were lucky enough to have public funding for that project. Yeah. So we had participants attending workshops. I think one of them was actually a collaboration with Springback, one of the sessions, and I was also collaborating with editors. So it was this, how to say, they had to write the first or the second they did write was on a short, like overnight. So like just starting with writing something that had to be quite short and you had to hand it in the next morning. For a lot of writers, it's a really short time. Like in the actual daily papers, one of the papers I'm working with not very often, they wanted me to hand it in before midnight. Yeah, we did this. And you know, you get home at 10:30 in the evening, so you have 1.5 hours. And I'm just trying to imagine who are these writers or readers, you know, at midnight, like refreshing. Where is that review? Where is that review? It's very difficult to write good text, but I think, like you said, I think it's a really good exercise to learn how to write short text and for different editors and for, you know, to learn all of this, because writing short is also a way of learning how to write, how to say, a focused long text. Because if you do something in almost like a tweet, you can just expand it into a long text. It's a lot more difficult to have the long text and try to get it down to the tweet. So, yeah. Just we did the same for like 10 years ago for Tanec Prague actually festival, because we wanted the people who are coming to the festival to have already printed the review from the last show the day before. So we really had the deadline by midnight. So we got 10 p.m. and writing in the tram, submitting it to the newspaper so that in the morning we can print it and send it to Ponec and it's already on the board. I think we did it like 1 year or 2 years and then we totally burned out that this is not possible. This is not the way to write the reviews, but it was a great challenge. It was great because it's so fresh and you have to put it into the words. And we started to be these critics writing during watching the performance already, doing the reviews. So, sorry.
But the point I also thought about was that what I liked about that project was also that it educated the editors. Yes. Because they are also a kind of people deciding whether or not to write a dance critic, and just getting into their head, and then I mean the daily newspaper editors, because the kind of online magazine editors like I was, they know that they're kind of more specialized, but just trying to enter the head of this broad cultural editor of the daily newspaper and just telling the person that there is actually a dance performance here, and this that could translate to a text in this way. I think it's quite important, or it could at least produce some more space for writing about dance.
I think this comes to, I showed the badge on my rucksack. I showed Emily just before. It says, I heart limits. I love limits. And I do. I would sorry, I would never produce anything without, a deadline or a counselor, because it just doesn't happen. But for me, I know other people do. But I think this starts coming to a question which I find interesting, which is when we're writing about the topic and we're given a format, we actually start understanding how language works. And actually, although I find writing difficult and so on, I actually do find that really interesting about what you can do with language and words in relation to your topic and how that can work and what effects you can produce within these formats. And it's like a learning process of how language, how to become a craftsperson with using language. And I think for me anyway, if I think as with a choreographer, I don't think you can survive on ideas alone. You have to take some pleasure in the material, the movement, and the composition of the movement. And likewise with a writer, at some point you have those ideas are not going to communicate unless you have if you take some interest in the actual material of language itself. And that actually, I think, is possibly what sustains me more than anything. Is I go, each time I complain and I complain, but in the end I go, you know what, if I do this and I do that and I can change it around, then it gives this effect. And I do take some pleasure in finally going, oh no, that was a good phrase. Nobody's going to notice it, I'm sure. But I thought that I changed that word from the end to the beginning, and that was a good decision. So it's like
nice. Do also the people who you edit texts to think the same? Like, oh, it was a great idea. Sanjoy suggested me to move this sentence to the beginning.
You might have to ask somebody who I've edited.
Do you appreciate it?
I definitely do appreciate it. Maybe it was harder in the beginning. No, wait. I'm completely the opposite of. I think I started off being the complete opposite of Sanjoy. I do not love limits at all. I feel like with the reference of a craftsperson, I really can't remember, but there's a kind of sculpture or something in pottery where you take things away rather than build on. I can't remember the name, but that is definitely my style of writing, in that I splurge and then have to like bring it down and refine and edit. Yeah, Sanjoy helps me with that. And especially I think you can, or at least I can, you can become very attached to certain things, which having an outside eye can help you see that it's not necessarily as necessary as you might think it might be. But I think actually, like, I think the relationship between having a writer and editor is also really important, and you also develop relationships with editors that you trust as well, and that you really, I feel like if you're writing for someone repeatedly, then you get to know each other. Sanjoy will probably know the things that are my Emilyisms that probably don't need to be there. And then also, you know, and that's the continual learning process. Like, I mean, it's very hard as a a writer once you've and also I didn't have any formal writing education, you know. I didn't do a dance writing course. I came through training as a dancer, so it's very hard once you graduate then to find mentorship, and there's opportunities like Springback or certain courses, but when you've got a full-time job as well, it's very difficult. So then when you can find like an editor and that will do that to work and also give you the I don't know if respect's too strong of a word, but because you can write for a lot of places and they won't tell you what they've done. They'll just redo it all. But whereas if it's in comments and it's a discussion and it feels like a dialogue between you and the editor, and like Sanjoy will always be like, oh, what do you think about this? Or we can have a discussion about it. So I feel like it's a good learning process.
I just think what you're sort of commenting on, that the editing process is very often not talked so much about, but it's such an important thing. It's one of the things that I also love about writing, having good editors. And I also use quite a lot of friends, like before sending it to the editor. I have friends and they send text to me. So we do this quite a lot, of reading each other's text and getting feedback and having different sort of outside eyes who sort of see different things, who want, like you said, they want different things in the text. Just like the readers, my editor will want one thing, and I can have two friends who's looking for something completely different. So I think I learned quite a lot also from sort of just having editors and just, you know, making some people into editors also.
Yeah, I also realize more and more is so important, the role of the editor. And there's nothing scarier than getting a text after editing, there is nothing edited. That is like, did they even read it? Do they even care? You know, I mean, like more and more, I mean, it's very painful to get text which is completely read, you know, with corrections. But more and more I appreciate that when someone really takes the time and really works on it with you. And I have like, from more like my research experience and writing articles, it's the strictest editors are the best.
I just wanted to also add that I think with this element of trust or a relationship with the editor, I think one really nice thing about it as well, I mean, this is a conversation you could go into for ages, but I think, I'm not sure if everyone shares this, but I think there's a great deal of imposter syndrome that I often have as a writer, and feeling like, oh, who am I to be reviewing this performance? And I mean, that goes into loads about the relationship between a critic and the performer and the artist and hierarchy and things. But I feel like when you feel like you're a team, you know, and it's not just you on your own, then I think, and it's a discussion and it's not just you putting this thing out into the world on your own, I think that can really help with this feeling. Mm-hmm.
And exactly the writing workshops that I've done, I've done resolution review since, I don't know, 2007 or something, anyway, a long time every year, and other workshops, every single time what people come to it with, the participants, what they want and what they don't get is some kind of forum where the actual writing and the process can be talked about and fed back and edited, and actually that's a big motivator for all of these writers trying to do something. Otherwise they're just you know, one voice, you know, coming up on a blog or whatever, they don't get feedback, and so it's a really important part of their motivation is to have that.
Thank you. You all mentioned talking about dance, that you say that you don't really write so much, but you do the seminars, you do the talking and discussions more and more nowadays, definitely more than 10 years ago, I would say. Do you feel talking helps among the people, maybe with the artists? How is it with getting the dance to the words on the paper? How is it with dance talks?
Do you mean, I mean, one thing I do often with people, for people who are going to produce writing, one process that I use a lot is after a performance, just, we talk about it and we have a conversation. And then at the end of that conversation, I usually say, what did you just see and what? And I have asked questions. And by the end of that conversation, they have produced a lot of vocabulary.
Yeah.
And I say, well, now you've already got the words now, you can go and write it. So I do that a lot. I'm not sure if that's the kind of thing I always did that. That's just
I
a way.
was suggesting that I feel it helps, like the more we talk about dance, then we are not so afraid to write the words on the paper.
It's
because
true. But I do think that they're very separate competencies, talking and writing.
You can have two.
I can't remember. I think you also said something about with like talking with artists themselves. And I think it can be tricky in terms of, if say going to review a performance and whether the question of whether or not to stay for the post-show talk often comes up for me, because I think sometimes a post-show talk with an artist can be really helpful or insightful or really add to what you've maybe been thinking about the piece. But I think it can also, especially with this kind of concept of imposter syndrome that I brought before, it can really kind of cloud or make you doubt your own thoughts and reactions. And I really think, reviews are obviously subjective, and I think every writer is allowed to have it. I think we've moved away from this authoritarian vision of a dance critic being like, this is what this piece is about, this is what it's like, and you have to accept this, and this is the definitive opinion. I think it's becoming more and more, okay, this is a view on the piece. And I think sometimes going and talking to the artist can make you, or for a poster talk or whatever, when you've got to turn around a review and your opinion on it can add more pressure or worry or and stress over your conviction, your own opinion or your experience of the piece.
Also, if I can add to that, for me, this is also a question, but like we should review the piece. And the piece should be talking to us. That's how I look at it. So, of course, it's very interesting to hear them speaking about like what is the motivation or the creative process, and there was like problems and all that. That's very interesting, but the normal audience doesn't know that. And I'm writing as a member of that audience, and I'm talking about the piece that's talking to me. So that's also then really clouds the opinion. Yeah.
That just, it comes back to who are we writing for, right? Are we writing for the audience who want to get your opinion on the experience and that, or is it for the artist and the discourse and whatever they want to get across? I think it comes back to this.
But I think that connects, because it's something also something about saying to the artist that what actually gets over the edge of the stage is what we are going to review. And if your idea doesn't get over that edge, it doesn't help kind of formulating it in words. And of course, it's not possible to make that division. But I also thought that it's actually also a fact that if critics speak, it's not only about talking to the artist, because also if critics speak, if we speak together about the same about something we see, we also get, our perspectives get unified. So I use that when I do writing courses, especially for young people. We always start with this exercise that we see something together, and then they write immediately, just five single words or something. And then those words are very often completely different when they just write. But if you tell them to just speak and to say some words, I listen to you and they say, oh, that's a nice word, but I'll say that too. and that happens with grown-ups too.
And I also think it's about how you sort of what the question is, if did you like it, for instance, is going to sort of push you in one direction. And I think all of this is about formats and styles. Like you write about the performance or you write against the performance, and quite often I write like alongside it. If I don't find a way in, like you said, whatever comes across, sometimes I have a hard time understanding what the artist wants, what it's doing, and then I just try to sort of, I don't know, run along or tag along and, just answer with whatever I have. That is also something that comes in. And very often when we talk about criticism, it's like, it's one thing. It's a bit like dance was only ballet or only polka, which would be really, really strange. That's the only thing. And that's dance writing is also all of these things and all of these different ways of doing that. And that's sort of, I find that even more within dance than in some, especially theater, actually. I think theater criticism has a tendency to be a bit more, how to say, ensarta. Not one-dimensional, not so sort of, mainly, perhaps also because of a lot of traditional theater has this one story that's being told. It's also with actually with contemporary dance that's very sort of doing one very specific thing. If it's very like a specific character doing one thing, then you retell what's been happening, and then it's sort of that sort of has a tendency to direct the text to some extent. So
thank you.
Yeah, so just a non-normative criticism. That's
yeah, great. We have one question from our attendees, participants. So now it's a few minutes left for the end of our talk. So if you have any, even you here are present, you can get a mic and ask a question, or anyone in the Zoom, YouTube, Facebook, or whatever in the world, you can type your question here. So here is the first one. Hello, could you talk a bit about your experience with dealing with reactions from dance artists after reading your reviews? How do you deal with negative or positive feedback on your writing? Do you think having online comments under the reviews are useful, or on the contrary? Thank you. Easy one.
Well, I might as well dive in and tell you about the worst time. It was an artist who I knew personally, and whose previous work I had written some very positive reviews for, and I wrote quite a negative review of his piece, and because I knew people. I knew that he was really upset by it, but I also knew that while I was writing it, I was like, okay, I didn't get on with this piece. Because of who, I'm really gonna have to say why, so that there's no ambiguity about why it gets this. But it was really, so it might have, I think it came across even harder than it might have done, because I was going, okay, it has to be like this. So I happen to know that he was very personally upset, and we are now good friends again. And I was asked to be on a panel about criticism and about relations between artists and critics. So I contacted him and said, "Will you come and talk to me on the panel and be my co-locutor?" And then it was a way of talking about the relationship between the artist and the critic that wasn't simply talking about that particular review, which would have been like, you know, poking a stick into the wound, but we could then have a conversation in public, not on the same side. And then afterwards he said, what a good step forward it was. So there we are, not talking about the thing, but talking in general actually was a good step.
I think as well, it kind of brings it back to questions of finance and money as well, but because dance writing is the way it is, I think people, me not so much, but I have a lot of friends who end up doing work with artists a lot of the time, or with institutions, or writing for institutions or theatres. And I think that can produce some difficulty then when you have to maybe go and review that artist you've worked with and written a program note for, or things like that. I haven't personally had any negative responses to my reviews, I don't think. Oh, wait. I think I've just had situations when I've had a relationship with the PR, and then they've asked me to send them the final review, and then I haven't, then it's just gone very quiet and we haven't talked again. But I have had very negative responses to, or back and forth about interviews, which I write a lot, which I know I think Sanjoy can guess what I'm going to bring up, but I've had quite a few situations where I've had people come back to me and said, I would never say that. I did not say that, or they've seen the quote. And it's quite awkward sometimes because I've had to refrain myself sending them the audio clip of them saying that. So yeah, I think not yet for reviews I've had, but some interviews, there's been a bit of friction sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I've had both comments and feedback, but I also get quite a lot of, not that often, but sometimes I get on Facebook, like on Messenger, and private messages, and I find that sort of the most difficult, because then it's our private conversation about something they did public, and then I said something publicly about it, and I prefer to have the entire conversation somewhere public. So if I write something that's public about your public work, and you also want to have an opinion on that, I'm fine with entering that conversation. I really find it difficult when they either just send me these messages and we're supposed to have like letters back and forth, or when they write about it somewhere and just tag you, which feels a bit like standing in a foyer and someone's talking behind your back, just talking loud enough for you to hear it, but not saying like, do you want to comment, or asking you to be a part of the conversation, but just making sure you hear that they're not satisfied with what you did. And then I find that a very difficult way of sort of entering that conversation about sort of the piece. It's something about the hostility of just mentioning and not discussing. But I think it's really good to have more discussions, actually. I love that. If I'm being unclear, or if I've been too harsh, or all of this, I really don't mind doing that conversation. I love it. Well, not love it, but depends. That's maybe pushing it. But I think it's important to have more of those, actually.
Yeah, I agree, because that's like one feature that I like very much on our website, that we have this comment section, and then of course it also happens on Facebook and more on our website. So, and that's and it's it's reaction to the writing, it's reaction to the piece. There is like alternative reviews going on under the piece sometimes, so that's very interesting. So people have the space to express themselves as well. Note on interviews, that's interesting, because in Czech tradition we authorize the interviews, so we always send them the text before it goes online, and so they can give you back something completely different. But it doesn't happen that we publish something that they didn't prove.
I would say that was the back and forth was before it was published. So I would send the quotes that then had an interesting editing process. But it depends on the publication as well, because some publications I work for will send the quotes and just that, and others will send the whole interview. And it's very interesting. Some people really want to go in and start editing your work, which I feel like also as a writer, as someone who you feel like this is your profession, for someone else to start going in and doing this when they're not that trusted editor that you've been working with can be quite difficult. But just
and maybe, different experiences of people reacting to whatever I write. But the most surprising was that I got quite a lot of negative feedback on my text, which was positive review. That was the most surprising that ever happened to me. Well, people have different opinions.
Just something about commenting. In my experience, dance being a much smaller world than theatre, and being a much less verbal world than theatre. People in theatre are making comments all the time, and dance people are mostly staying quiet, at least in public. Underline comments on something like The Guardian, very few people do, because it actually feels very public, and the stakes are a bit high. But on social media, I think people then do have conversations with each other and so on, but they do it in their networks usually. And I think, go ahead, a bit like, you don't have to speak with the artist to go and have a conversation about what you've just seen. In fact, sometimes it's better to leave the artists out and you just talk to your network. And if I'm left out of that, then totally fine, you know, I'm fine with that. Do whatever, you know, you want to.
Thank you. We had this issue about anonymous comments, and we had a huge discussion about commenting as anonymous. But now I would like to read another question I got from an anonymous attendee. So please, could you share your experience writing for a dance style that's not familiar to you? Thank you. And maybe it would be one of the last questions if there is nothing emerging right now, because we're getting short of time to be in time for the performances and not to talk during all the Czech Dance platform. So a different dance style, well, what that is not familiar to you. So if you're, I suggest that, I guess that if you're writing about contemporary dance, then you go to write a review about Byli or Giselle or whatever. So how do you deal with this?
Yeah, I think for me that's often it's I mean it's the joy about writing about contemporary expressions, because you never know exactly what you get. Which is of course difficult, but also very nice. But I think it's in terms of writing, it's about, at least for me, to be honest about that, to actually to write that it's the first time I meet this kind of expression or this style, and so that the reader knows and the artist knows. And of course, then you sometimes get the response that, why didn't you send someone who knows what this is, and who are you to write about this? But that, I think, is, I mean, at the moment when something is public, it is public, and it's in some ways anyone's rights to mean something, to actually tell people, to say publicly what they think about it. So, but it's about, but as an editor, that's something that I worked with a lot, with the text coming in, and you kind of had the feeling that people hadn't, or the writer had forgotten about that. That you felt that it could have been, it was, the text would be better if they were actually more honest about their own position in relation to the work.
Okay.
It's a situation that happens to all of us several times, because you always come across something that you haven't come across before, and that is a really good thing, and I think it's valuable to do. And one of the things that it, I think, forces us to do, and this is the advice at least I give to people, is to go back to basics, which is like to really focus on the basics of what is happening here, what is the effect, how does that work, and not to try and bring all of it. Basically, it's really good practice for going back to seeing rather than looking. And I think that's a great starting point to keep returning to. So it actually renews things. It's hard especially with codified, quite highly codified styles. Like, for example, if you're watching an Indian classical dance and you don't know anything about the structure, but it's obviously structured, you can't write about the structure but you can, you know. It might not be very sophisticated, but you can write about it in terms of what you're seeing. And I just think that's a great exercise.
And you can also do some post research and actually discover that there is structure in Indian dance, and then write and then inform the reader about that. For that's also kind of opening up a door. And being honest on that. I don't know this structure, but there is structure here.
I don't know what honesty is, but I would say don't be dishonest. I don't to be honest is I mean, I don't say I honestly have never seen this time before, but I don't then pretend that I have. So I don't make any declarations about that.
Okay. Thank you. So maybe time for last comments from you. Any comment you would like to add, but maybe what can we do for dance criticism in Europe? What else can we do besides we are doing, or what can be done? Any ideas what would help to the position of dance criticism to be even better than it is now? what is the future? What is the visions? What is the dreamland of dance criticism in Europe?
It's difficult because it's so sort of boring to come back to the subject of money, but of course money has something to do with having the possibility to devote time, not only to sort of have time to do the writing, but also to have time to do the not writing to some extent. I think one of the reasons for me staying a critic for this long has been since 2008, it's been possible for Norwegian critics to apply for grants, like working grant. So get a grant that's not for text, but it's sort of like a basis. It's like, instead of doing, standing at McDonald's, and I think sort of having time to see performances and stuff and think, and not having to sort of, and to have that time to see enough performances and to do sort of your own research and find your own way into it. If you want to write few long texts or many short texts, just to sort of explore formats and ways of working, and in that way also being a part of making the structure for dance writing. So not just waiting for the structures to sort of appear, but that critics are a part of sort of making the places and formats you want to sort of have a critical practice, which is what I prefer to call it. Yeah. So always comes back to money, or at least sort of critics being a part of making that sort of future and ways of doing that.
And then coming back to bouncing off with the point of money, then this would enables the time and the thinking, the way into it for more people, and this creates the diversity, and then this gives us, unless there is a structure there, it feels very like, I don't know, there's a small part of me inside that's talking about like, oh, we deserve to be paid more money, that feels like it's greedy or something, but then when you actually come back to these points we've discussed about it being a profession and something you have to train in and practice and go and see all these shows and build knowledge about, people can't do that from a range of different backgrounds if they're not financially supported in it like any other career. So that can only, if we attract these different people, that can only like make the art form of writing richer and discourse on dance richer as well.
Yeah, it has you have mentioned it both of you, but it's very important, this recognition of that a critical practice is more than the actual writing. It's about following a field. It's about thinking. It's about reading. It's about it's a lot of things that takes time and that's difficult to quantify. And we should also kind of maybe protect it, and it shouldn't be quantified in a way, but there has to be some kind of financing, some way of financing it anyway. And I also think it's important, as Anette says, that the critics need to be involved in the work in creating that environment, because no one will create it for us.
I don't really have a point. To my role, my life. But I just think at the moment that ultimately the future of whatever involves the future is, it has to work with readers need to want it. There we are. It's ultimately criticism. We can set ourselves up and write and so on, but unless it actually has some kind of readership, then it's a dead end. So it's a question of maybe engaging with readers. Maybe readers can come and tell us some more stuff about about why they like things and what. I'm making this up right now, okay? But ultimately, it's about the readership, isn't it? The readership is multiple and many things, but that's where it lands in the end, no?
Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. Thank all our readers that they read us still. It would be great if you comment more or talk with us about dance. And as you mentioned the money, I have to thank all the organizations that helped us to organize this event. So it's Ministry of Culture, EEA Norway Grants, the Magistrate of Prague City, State Fund Culture, and many other partners that deal with us today. Forgot someone? I hope not. But anyway, thank you all that you're supporting dance criticism because we need it, and we do the most from us to write the good critics for you and good reviews. So thank you very much. Thank you for listening, asking, and thank you all.